Today we journey into unexplored territory for Creaking shelves. Two long, complex games, easily the heaviest we've covered so far. They will not be for everyone. One is the legendary game of the Cold War, Twilight Struggle, a game that topped the Board Game Geek rankings for a monumental 5 years. What, you might wonder, could topple that?
Only a game that attempts something even more grandiose, to explore a subject of greater importance and in greater depth. I speak, of course, of Labyrinth, War on Terror. Although, Matt, is War on Terror a nickname? Because I can't see it printed on the box.
What have you done?
You told me to get Labyrinth.
Yeah, the War on Terror, a game about the US's continuing war with Islamic terrorism around the world.
Well, this is a game about being trapped in a terrifying maze. Got a scary ghost and everything.
Don't go anywhere.
This makes much more sense.
Okay, let's do this. Twilight Struggle pits the United States against the Soviet Union in a battle for nothing less than the soul of the world. Both powers will be trying to gain controlling influence in the major territories, but not pushing the world into all-out nuclear war. Twilight Struggle is a card-based wargame, which means you've got a big board and lots of teeny cardboard chits, like you'd expect to see in many wargames, but the gameplay is driven by the cards in your hand. You will play a card each round, either for the historical event depicted, or for the number of operations points.
The same in Labyrinth.
There is a subtlety though. Some events will be associated with your opponent, and when you have one of these in your hand, you can only use it for the operations value, while your opponent uses the events. Hello?
Hi, America.
What is it, Russia?
Couldn't help notice you playing Socialist Government card.
Oh really?
Yes, and we would love to remove US influence.
I thought you might.
You know, in Soviet Republic, event play you. Same thing happens here.
So, what are these operations good for? Adding your influence to a country. Realignment roles to reduce enemy influence in a country.
In Soviet Russia, dice realign you.
That doesn't make any sense! Attempt a coup to take over a country. Or launch a card to the space race and avoid triggering an opponent's event.
Yeah, Labyrinth is pretty much the... different. Labyrinth is not a battle between two equally matched opponents. It is the might of the American military versus a determined and relentless terrorist threat.
Yes, it is a war to be waged with guns and bombs, but so much more, it is a war of ideas, of politics.
One side wins by turning the nations of the Middle East to their cause, but whereas the superpowers of Twilight Struggle are equal and opposite, we are same, you and I. Labyrinth is hugely asymmetric. For one, the victory conditions are different. America needs to create good governance across the Middle East, while the jihadists want to establish Islamic rule.
But they'll settle for detonating a nuclear weapon in America.
Even more so, the very actions the two sides can perform are appropriately different.
The US today deployed troops to Pakistan to counter the growing threat of Islamic extremism in the region. We go now live to our correspondent Robin, who is on the ground with the troops as they attempt to disrupt jihadist activity in the area.
Yes, the US strategy on the ground is one of hearts and minds. We need to quietly deal with the threat of extremism, and disruption is one of our most effective tools.
Is there any concern over the long-term impact US involvement in the region might have?
No, by and large these nations are happy to have us here.
Of course, in the unlikely event that anyone does disagree with you, there is always the war of ideas.
A kind of aggressive debate that will soon change a nation's mind about you.
Managing this support is essential for the US player, as is improving the governance of friendly Middle Eastern nations.
Thank goodness for the excellent debating prowess of America's leadership.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Robin, but I've just received word that the jihadists are building up in Libya and are about to pursue a major jihad.
Does it have oil?
Yes?
Invade!
The only way to deal with Islamist regimes is an all-out invasion, but committing too many troops at once puts you into overstretch.
So yes, you can remove this enemy state from the map, but by committing more troops to the board, you reduce the number of cards in your hand. You can't pull out troops until the job is done.
But that won't take too long, right?
The jihadists have their own issue, though. Funding.
Funding limits the number of terror cells the jihadists can have on the board at any one time. The best way to keep funding high is by creating terror plots across the map, especially because they're expensive for the US to stop.
Yeah, we struggled to come up with any suicide bomber jokes.
We could go into the minutiae of the asymmetry of Labyrinth for ages. We could talk about how the jihadists have to roll to spend ops points, but for the US, their ops price is determined by the governance of a country. Or we could talk about how different areas of the map play into one another's strategies. It's these differences, combined with the complex mix of politics and violence, that make this such a fascinating game to experience. That's why it's a great game.
Factions of Twilight Struggle might not be as mechanically distinct.
We are same, you and I.
But that doesn't mean they don't feel different to play. That difference is mostly borne out by the distribution of event cards. The Soviets have an easier time at the start. By the late war, the US is getting the lion's share of the powerful events. So the Soviets will be dictating play at the start and struggling to hold on by the end.
Is Twilight Struggle a bit zero-sum?
It can be, but it's never as simple as you go to France and so now I'll go there too and so on. You're fighting your hand of cards. You're trying to minimize the damage from opposing events while trying to take back the initiative. And then you have coups, realignment rolls, and influence as different tools for dealing with opposing play. Choosing the right one for the right job is important.
Just like in Labyrinth.
Yeah, both of these games are endlessly fascinating for much the same mechanical reasons.
So I guess it's down to complexity and theme.
Yeah, I think those are the important points of comparison here.
Alright, I'll go first. I love how Labyrinth is able to critically examine the defining war of our lifetime, but although it doesn't take sides, it does expose certain cynical truths.
The game lasts until you have completely drawn through the deck, which makes a satisfyingly long game. But if you want, you can agree to play twice through the deck, 3 times through the deck. Like in real life, it's a war that need never end.
Just like invading a country makes you feel incredibly powerful when it happens, but it traps your troops in a war of attrition that could last potentially the entire game.
It is ridiculous, in a good way. And I think because of my age, I can't quite say the same about Twilight Struggle. I mean, the events are obviously thematic, but I feel that theme more abstractly, because it's not my history, it's my parents' history. But this comparison has made me appreciate the symmetry of the ops actions in Twilight Struggle. The fact that even though the US and the Soviets were at opposite ends of the political spectrum, their methods were all too similar.
We are same, you and I.
We get it. Twilight Struggle is able to capture the feel of the Cold War spectacularly well. The uncertainty of why is your opponent focusing on that continent? Are they about to play a scoring card? What cards do they have left in their hand to play? It's just fantastic.
While Labyrinth is trying to explore something much more complex, less well understood, and in greater depth.
Admirable, but it does add a lot of complexity to the game.
Yes. But it's a complicated business, and it does give us one of the funniest rules in gaming.
Mandatory follow-through.
There is a problem here. Would you agree that if you're going to explore a deep topic in depth, then you have a certain obligation to fidelity?
Yeah, I guess.
Then there's a problem with how Labyrinth is portrayed. It's too simplistic in its discussion of terrorism while pretending to show a deeper truth about the topic. Take the jihadists. All terrorists are portrayed as one and the same, when in fact terrorism is a catch-all term for a huge variety of different local and international organisations, not all of which are capable of attacking the US or necessarily affiliated with Al-Qaeda. To fight different organisations with different goals requires different approaches. By lumping all of America's enemies into one black lump, you run the risk of only capturing a short-sighted view of the enemy. Isn't there enough media that does this already? By attempting to provide a more complex simulation, Labyrinth leads players to the conclusion that this is how things work, when in fact it's full of sweeping assumptions and generalizations.
To what extent is this also true of Twilight Struggle? I mean, the history of the 20th century wasn't decided just by America and Russia, no matter what they like to think. And that nuclear war victory condition is just weird.
Yeah, agreed. Twilight Struggle also makes some pretty sweeping generalizations, but it's not aiming to be as complete a description of the history. Labyrinth is trying to explain a much more nuanced conflict, which I absolutely applaud it for. It comes together as a phenomenal game, but it also sweeps aside much of the nuance it's aiming to cover.
See what you mean. Twilight Struggle goes for the broader sense of the conflict, the tension of making a misstep, and it shows you how sometimes these superpowers felt justified in meddling in world affairs.
Indeed, Labyrinth adds a lot of complexity to Twilight Struggle's system, but thematically it's not effective.
So I guess we're going with the masses and rewarding the golden greater to Twilight Struggle.
Yes, indeed.
That was a big one.
Huge.
Thank you for watching Twilight Struggle vs. Labyrinth.
Twilight Struggle won, but that's because it's a sad two-player solo versus each other thing, whereas next week we'll be looking at cooperative games, which are much better.
Although these ones are very difficult.
Ooh, what are they?
The Grizzled versus Lost Expedition.
Oh, that sounds good. As always, if you like this video, then please subscribe, like, and share with your friends. Comment below your thoughts, which game you think should have won, and we'll see you next time.